Hey, good evening and welcome to Table Enabled. We're starting a new set of halachas. Halachos b'sias hapas. Got breaking bread. 167. It's a long simon. Malcolm Zman of Tzio Meal, but say we're talking about sitting down to break bread at a meal. Usually people think about this on Shabbos when you have a joint meal. We'll talk more about this and Ian to lean on about this prospect of a joint meal. What exactly is going on? Is it different than eating bread privately, for breakfast or something like that? Aleph, where do you break the bread? The person who's breaking the bread, the place where it's baked the most, right? We're talking about in olden times where sometimes the bread wasn't breaking. Or sometimes people, a lot of women, they make challah for Shabbos. I remember this. When I used to have Shabbos meal. Sometimes the person who was making a lot of times the meal that I was eating, the dough wasn't baked in certain places. So you want to break the bread in the place where it's most edible. Our bread, I think it just means commercially made bread that doesn't have the problems of homemade bread where people don't fully cook it, fully bake it. So then you break it beside pas, meaning where it's facing up. Beside elyon v'atachton, you should cut a little bit from the top and the bottom. Uh, we're talking about um, before you bake it, because before you make the bracha, you're supposed to make a small incision on it, so there shouldn't be a hefsek between the bracha and the betzia. V'yachtoch prusa betzia v'sarach lachtoch ma'at. Right, you should cut a little bit. This is before the bracha, before you make hamotzi. Cut a little bit from the top and the bottom. It has to be a small enough incision that if you would hold the bread from that place, it wouldn't separate from the rest of the bread. If not, it's already considered broken and it's not a shalim, and you shouldn't be making hamotzi on that. You should leave it like that. Then make the bracha. And after you finish the bracha, then you should split it, meaning cut it, right? So they make sure when you made the bracha, the pas was shalim. Below yifsa prusa ktana, the first piece of cut you cut off shouldn't be a small piece. I mean, it shouldn't be smaller than a kazayas. Nisha ner sarayin. It looks like a person he doesn't have. He's not a generous person. Lo prusa yotzer mikambetza. It shouldn't be a huge piece. Nisha ner karavasan. It looks like you're a person that's a glutton that needs to eat so much. So it shouldn't be bigger than a kabetza. So when you cut the pieces for the people on Shabbos, I happen to run the meal where I am, so I cut the pieces of challah. It should be between a kazayas and a kabetza. We'll see on Shabbos actually. It could be bigger than a kabetza. Hago v'Shabbos lo yachal b'kikar ha'achar bracha. On Shabbos, you shouldn't even make an incision before the bracha. They should have bracha shlemo, kikar shlemo. They should be really shalom, completely shalom, not even with a cut. Of course, if you made a little cut, it doesn't hurt. It's only a chol. You're eating by yourself. But Shabbos, apparently, the way was is that they wanted to save bread, so they cut a huge piece off the bread to feed to a lot of different people because maybe they were saving the bread or something like that, or they were huge challahs like at a wedding. So then you cut a huge piece to give to other people. Or on Shabbos, there's a mitzvah to look like a rav, so look like someone they're hungry. But then the Shema is supposed to engage in physical activity, physical enjoyment thing on Shabbos. And on Shabbos, it's not halacha beis. Yivarach hamotzi lechem min aretz. So we know the famous bracha. V'im rabim mesuv miyachavnu lilibam lishma bracha. Yeah, I mean, if the other people in Miyot say they should have to pay attention and they should answer minimum baruch. Lichavin la'amin sha'omrim. The person who's making the bracha, he should bechavin to motzi them, and he should also listen to their amin. Yitain revach ben lechem ben min, right? Motzi lechem min haaretz, mem and mem. So you don't want to mix words together. Again, this is not makiv. Gimel ein levarich kodem sheyitvos alechem. We're going to learn about all making bracha. You're supposed to hold the item that you're making the bracha on. Same thing over here. I am motzi dalit. Yitain shtei yadav ala pas b'shas bracha. You should put both your hands on the bread while you make the bracha. Sheish ben eser etzbos. Your hands have 10 fingers. Can I get eser mitzvahs at tluis b'pas? There's 10 mitzvahs in the pas. The Gemara Masechah Shabbos talks about there's 10 malachos involved in making a loaf of bread. Ulevarich. Similarly, there's 10 words in the bracha hamotzi. V'eser tevos pasuk matzmiach chatzir lebehemo. There's a pasuk in nach. V'eser tevos pasuk ene kol lecha yisaber. There's a pasuk in ashrei. V'eser tevos pasuk eretz chitos ora. This is a pasuk in the Torah. Talk about the zayin minim. V'eser tevos a pasuk v'yitain lecha. There's also a pasuk. All of you say this after conclusion of Shabbos and some sidurim. So these are all remes. Therefore, you should hold on with your 10 fingers, connected the 10 mitzvos of the pas and the 10 words and all these brachos that talk about pas. Halif, hey, lo yivsa ashiaviu lefanav melech or lift on. You should have salt or something to dip, a dip, right? Then you should make the bracha because you're supposed to dip it in salt or a dip. Perish Rashi called over nechal a pas. The laugh is what produces a pas. It makes it taste better, right? Eating dry bread doesn't taste so good. Nikia. However, if the bread is clean, I would like to say that it's white bread. Or shehim with 2 bells, but tablin or melach and shalanu, or it's baked with salt or eggs or things like that. Oshin is kavin lechal pas chareva, or he doesn't care. He wants to eat dry bread. This is only a din l'chachila to have salt. So the Ramah says, nonetheless, even if you're having bread that tastes good, it doesn't need something else to help it taste better. There's still an inyan. I don't know what this word inyan means, but there's an idea. I don't know. This Beis Yosef quotes the name of Shibbolei Leket. I don't know where the Shibbolei Leket got it from. He says, because as he said, the table is like a mizbeach, and your eating is like a korban. When it comes to bringing karbanos, you should have salt on all your karbanos, so therefore you should bring salt to the table and presumably dip it in. Tosos, and Agos Hashri said it protects you from punishment. Again, I'm not so machmir about having salt because, again, these things are not clear from the Gemara. These are just Achronim and Rishonim that just made up stuff. Just because it's not exactly Mizbeach. I mean, your table's on a Mizbeach. Otherwise, you'll be on a Vera for building a Bama outside the base of Midrash. Vav yochal miyad le'asiyah and bracha le'achila. You should eat right away, and you shouldn't talk idly. You shouldn't chat with your friend after making the bracha le'achila. V'imsach, if you did, sarach lachzor levarich, you have to go back and make a bracha. You have to go back and make another bracha. There's a hefsek. Elim ken haisa sicha, unless the sicha, the chatting, with dvarim inyan should dvarim hamish mavark alav gon shibirach labas koda pas. But kodem shachal amar reviu melech lifton. He made a bracha, and then he forgot to bring salt. He says bring salt, or bring some chumash to dip it into. I don't know who likes chumash. Tenu leploni leechel, or he says give this to my friend to eat, right? Because he's starving. Nu meichel behema, or give food to the animals. It's supposed to feed your animals before yourself. Because it's called part of the Suda. Even for these things, you shouldn't stop. The Ramah is a huge halacha, where he says when you're sitting down at a Shabbos meal, right? All you have to do is wait till the person who made the bracha and broke the bread, he eats a little bit, and then you can start talking freely even before you get the bread and eat. But if technically they don't have to eat, you don't have to give from the bread that you break to every person. They can eat their own bread from their own loaf of bread that they bring over because they're careful about eating only whole wheat or spelt. So technically they can start talking before they eat their bread. They can rely on your hamotzi for their bread. They don't have to make other hamotzi, but they can speak idly about anything they want. And this is the Allah according to the Ramah. The Mishnah Berurah brings all the Achronim are cholek on the Ramah, but I will try to miyashiv and try to understand this Ramah and even to lean on and make sense of it. Zayin Ruvain shayanotel yadav la'achila. Ruvain, he hadn't washed yet. Sometimes, right, the person comes late and they start to wash their hands when he's already making the bracha. Yaakov yamavarach hamotzi. He's making the bracha and it's kavan lahotzi hashom. He wants everyone who hears to be yotze. Akach nigeh Ruvain yadav. And then he was in the middle of washing his hands. And then before he got bread, right, he dried his hands and he made Tilas Hadayim. Let me have sake. The bracha is not a hefsek. But Yotze Berachas Yaakov and Asarach Lachzor Levar Berachas Hamotzi. He doesn't have to make Berachas Hamotzi. He's Yotze. And the Mishnah Berurah says even if he hasn't even started to wash his hands, he hears the bracha and then he washes his hands and he makes Tilas Hadayim. It's not the Chachili not supposed to do this, but the Evid is not considered a hefsek. Chet is part of the Suda. Chet. Shachav Achav Berach Hamotzi. You forgot. This is about a Suda. It's also about a regular person who made any bracha, shakal or whatever. You didn't make hamotzi. In this car, b'toch Suda, you remember in the middle while you're eating bread, mavarech, you make the bracha, you're in the middle. Once your meal is over, you can't make a bracha after you're ready, right? The purpose of the brachos, right? The main purpose of brachos, like the Gemara Bracha says, that you're stealing from God without eating. You have to get reshus, you have to get permission from Hashem, because everything belongs to Hashem. Tad imhu mesupak im berach hamotzi im lav, eno chavos from berach. Brachos are midrabban. Not she made a bracha, so like the one on the call, don't make another bracha. Good. In b'makom berachas hamotzi berach sha'akal niyabedvaro. Instead of saying Motzi, it's Shahakal. I think I've seen this before. Shamar Brich Rachmana Malka Mari Daipita. He says a bracha in Aramaic. Yotze or Yotze, because Aramaic is also okay. And also Shachal Midvaro works for everything, right? Even for bread. Yidal, if Hayu Shnaim O Rabim, Echad Mevarach Lekulam. If there's two people or more than two people, so one person makes a bracha for all of them. Normally, right, when it comes to other brachos, like Hadama and Ais, we'll learn, you don't, right, every person makes a bracha for themselves, right? You're not generally multi other people, but you could be multi other people. When it comes to bread and wine, I'm going to talk more about this in Tolinon. You're supposed to, when you have multiple people eating together and they're a kovei suda together, it really one person is supposed to be multi everybody. You're not supposed to make individual brachas. The dafke heseba is only if they lean. Now heseba has an understanding of the Gemara, which people are not clear about. Heseba means to lean. I think it just means that it used to be a lot of people you see it on benches. They didn't have fancy chairs like we have that you can lean back on. All heseba means is to lean back. An armrest is leaning, but even just to lean back, your back is something to lean on as opposed to a bench. That's called heseba already. I think that's just a similar explanation. I don't know if there's so much confusion in halacha. And I think on Pesach, all you have to do is a back to a chair. If you don't have a back to a chair, then you bring a pillow. But you have a back to a chair, that's all you need. I was going to say, which is derech keva. You have to have chairs with the backs. Where you're going to sit in your chair for a long time. People have a hard time sitting on benches for a long time. Balabayas in b'nei beso, they gave stable. Even if you eat on benches, but you're with your family, so it's a permanent type of meal. Aval imay yoshim below say, but they're sitting on benches. Everyone makes a bracha on the bread themselves. If they in advance said, let's eat over here or in a certain place, they said a group of people got together, we're going to eat in such a place, even if they're sitting on benches and they're sitting in different corners of the room, heavy keva. One person is motzi everybody. Even if they're not leaning. Now again, this is a quote from Tosfos in the Rosh Hashanah. You know, nowadays we don't do a seba. Yes, you do a seba if you have chairs. Yeshiva didan b'shulchan echad, sitting together at one table, below shulchan b'mapa achaz, or you're sitting on the floor with one tablecloth, like it may be in Japan. Have a kviyas, that's a koveya. Even people that are part of a chabura, it's like haseba, they sit around one table. Right? You're sitting on benches, if you're sitting at one table or one tablecloth, that's okay. That's considered kviyas. Even for us, right? Even if we said we're going to eat in such a place, right? They have to actually eat at one table. If everyone eats in their own corner of the room, on their own table or their own place, right? Then you have wedding meals or something like that. So then it doesn't help to have bikovei makom. The poskim argue on this. There's a lot of poskim that say it's not true. The Gemara says if you say we're going to eat in such a place, right? Even if you're not eating at one table, right? So technically the halacha should be that one person is the most everybody. They're riding in a car, present day or back in the old day, they're riding on donkeys. Right? They all are eating from their own bread and they're all eating on their animals or in their car. Since they stopped, they're eating while walking. That's not a kfiyas. That's not joining together in a meal. They're working in the field. They're eating in different parts of the field. Even though they only are sharing one loaf of bread and they're eating at the same time. They don't say we're going to eat in such a place. They didn't advance make a kviya, so therefore they're separate eaters and therefore they're not joining together. Where they didn't establish a place, they didn't in advance make reservations at a certain place. But the Eved, if he's mechavin to be motzi, then it works. Now I disagree with this halakha, and I'll tell you why I need to lean on. If there's a lot of people dining together, who's the one that breaks the bread? The greatest person over the most VIP person. If they're equal in status, right? You're both MKs, members of Knesset, but none of you are heading a committee. None of you are a minister. One of them is a Kohen. Maybe that's what it means. It's a minister. Or one of them is a Kohen, actual Kohen. Mitzvah lagdimo. You give him precedence. A Kohen amaretz. A Kohen's amaretz. Talmid Chacham kodem. Talmid Chacham goes in front of the Kohen, even though he's not a Kohen. Ima Kohen gamkin Talmid Chacham. The Kohen is also Talmid Chacham. Elishu pachos min hasheni. but he's not as great in Talmud Torah as the greater Talmud Chacham, who's not a Kohen. Tov la'akdimo. The right thing to do is to give the Kohen the respect. Really, there's no chiyuv because technically the bigger Talmud Chacham beats out a Kohen who's a Talmud Chacham, but not a bigger Talmud Chacham as him. Where they talk more about this. Even if there's great VIP people over there, if you eat at someone's house, your guest at his house, who makes the bracha? There's an important halakha to know. The person who's a balabais, it's his house. Let's say when I learn the balabais is the one who pays for the meal, not necessarily the person whose house it's in. Even if the guest is a really respected person, if he's doing it, he should at least give them honor and say bershus. That's the minute to say bershus. You don't have to say bershus, only really when there's someone there who's more respected than the balabais, unless the balabais makes them motzi, but he says bershus in order to accord them honor. You're not allowed to eat anything until the botzei, the one who makes the bracha on hamotzi, until he eats. Who you could make the bracha, give everyone the bread, and then he eats, which I think is the correct thing to do. Make sure everyone has. And then you start eating together with the boteya, the person who broke the bread. He should start eating first. Everyone has their own. You go to a fancy meal, a wedding meal, a sheva brachos. Everyone has a roll in front of them. They don't need his bread. Then, even though he's making the bracha motzi everybody, they could eat first. If it's Shabbos, in order for them to eat first, they have to have 2 loaves, lechem mishnah. Only then could they eat before Kodam HaMotzei. He can only start cutting the bread after they answer Amen. Most people finish answering Amen to his bracha. The person who's given the honor of breaking the bread, he gets, when they pass around the brisket, he's the one who gets the brisket first. If he wants to accord honor and say, you take it first, he's allowed to, because that's his honor to give honor to other people. He gives a piece of the loaf of bread to everybody. Really, you're supposed to put it in front of the other person, and the other person takes it himself. This is a halacha that's quoted in the Rambam. I don't know where it's from the Gemara. When I was in yeshiva, some people did this. I thought it was really strange that when you make hamotzi, you shouldn't put it into the other person's hands. You put it on the table, he'll take it. Otherwise, if he takes it from your hand, that's like an avelus thing. Because from the pasuk, Persha Tzion Biadeh, this pasuk of avelus, Remez the Prusas hamotzi shnosim biyado b'shas avelus. This is a pasuk that references giving to someone who's in avel. You give it directly into their hands. If you're not in avelus, you shouldn't do that. Even though there's a concept that someone who is chayiv in a mitzvah, he's mostly someone else, even though he's not doing the mitzvah, right? You can't do that over here unless you're eating. Who don't need a bracha, right? So you can make the bracha for them because the bracha, you're teaching them to do the mitzvah. You got to make a bracha, even with Hashem's name, for Ktanim, to show them how do you make a bracha, teach them about the mitzvahs, even the Hagil Chinuch. But technically, they don't have to be Yotzei in your brachas, therefore you can say it for them, and they can be Yotzei with you, because technically they don't have to make a bracha. And that's, they'll say what? They're a Chayev Chinuch in the Chinuch Midarabbanim. That is the Chinuch that you're teaching in the bracha. There's no problem. Chaf, Afilu b'Shabbos, you Chayev Lechol Pas. Even on Shabbos, we have to eat bread. Lo yivarech lo chaveru b'berachas hamotzi imenu ochel. A person shouldn't be motzi his friend in hamotzi, even though technically the mitzvah, at least the first 2 meals of Shabbos, you have to eat bread. Onig Shabbos, and it should be like eating matzah on the first night of Pesach. We'll see in a second. The concept of yotza motzi, even if I did the mitzvah already, since all kol yisrael ravim zel is actually motzi someone else, on Shabbos it's not the case. Lo sharach levarach la'acherim alav pisha eno toim. You can't make a bracha of hamotzi if you're not going to eat. El berachas hamotzi the matzah v'lo rishon shal ben sach berachas yayin the kiddush ben shal layla ben shal yom. The only 3 exceptions is kiddush on Shabbos night and Shabbos day. You can make bor priya gefen and the bracha because those are berachas on mitzvahs. You have to make kiddush, and you have to eat a matzah on the first night of Pesach. So therefore, there's a concept the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah yotza motzi. Even though you're yotzei, you can make a bracha. Kol yishal rebim zel zeh. However, when it comes to the Suda Shabbos, you know, there's a mitzvah oneg Shabbos to have bread. The first 2 meals, unless you could technically, we'll see later on, in El Shabbos, you could fast if you want, if that's considered oneg for you. So you don't technically have to eat bread, therefore you can't be motzi someone unless you're eating bread also. When you get a piece of bread or you break the bread, you should eat that piece first. in order to endear the mitzvah to yourself. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is of the Mtzias Pas, the mitzvah of Mtzias Pas. We'll talk about that more in Ian to lean on this mitzvah, a special mitzvah of joining together to break bread together. That's a mitzvah, chibur mitzvah. So that is the mitzvah, the first piece of bread that he cut for you, that he's going to give to you, and that you cut for yourself. That should be the one that you're eating first, because it's a mitzvah to join together, to eat a meal together. If you want to find out more about the special mitzvah and really what Mtzias Pas really is all about, stay tuned for Ian to lean on coming up next.